It was the summer of 2005, and aboard the magnificent Royal Caribbean cruise ship, George and Jennifer, a young, vibrant couple fresh off their dream wedding, were embarking on the ultimate honeymoon, sailing through the glittering waters of the Aegean Sea. Their journey seemed nothing short of perfect. But paradise turned to peril. What began as a joyous celebration of love ended in tragedy and left behind one of the most perplexing mysteries to ever occur at sea, a disappearance that captivated the world and shattered the lives of those left behind. George Smith grew up in the charming town of Greenwich, Connecticut, where his family was the foundation of everything he did. His father, George Sr., was a hard-working business owner who ran a liquor store. More than a livelihood, it was the heart of the Smith family's legacy. George wasn't just a son, he was a dedicated and compassionate man, always putting family first. After earning his business degree from Babson College, he spent some time pursuing his career in Boston. But his love for family drew him back home, where he committed to helping his parents run the family business. For George, it wasn't just about responsibility, it was about creating a future where his parents could finally enjoy the life they'd worked so hard to build. Then there was Jennifer Hagel, a Connecticut native whose energy and passion lit up every room she entered. As an elementary school teacher, Jennifer was ambitious, intelligent, and deeply caring, a woman who brought warmth and joy to everyone around her. When George met Jennifer, it wasn't just a romance, it was the start of a partnership built on shared dreams and unwavering love. In June 2005, George and Jennifer began their journey together with a breathtaking wedding at Castle Hill in Newport, Rhode Island. Picture this, the sun dipping low over the ocean, a gentle breeze carrying the laughter of friends and family, and two people promising forever against the backdrop of the waves. It was the perfect start to a life full of promise. To celebrate their new life, they set sail on a luxurious 12-day honeymoon cruise through the sparkling waters of the Aegean Sea. From Barcelona to the picturesque shores of Italy and Greece, every stop promised adventure, romance, and unforgettable memories. For George Smith and Jennifer Hagel, it was the beginning of what should have been their happily ever after. But what they couldn't know was that their dream journey would take a tragic and unimaginable turn. A love story that began with joy and celebration would soon unravel into a chilling mystery, one that remains unsolved to this day. The honeymoon was everything George Smith and Jennifer Hagel had dreamed of, a luxurious 12-day journey through the Mediterranean's most breathtaking destinations. From the cosmopolitan charm of Barcelona to the sun-drenched beaches of the Greek islands, every stop offered a postcard-perfect adventure. But among all the picturesque locations, it was Mykonos that truly captured their hearts. The crystal-clear waters, the narrow cobblestone streets of its old town, and the intimate dinners in seaside taverns created memories they would carry forever, or so it seemed. Back on the ship, George and Jennifer were the kind of couple who easily made friends. Their vibrant personalities drew people to them, and they quickly formed a close-knit group with fellow passengers. Among their new companions was Josh Askin, a 20-year-old Californian with a sharp sense of humor, and three Russian-American youths, Greg Rosenberg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. Young, outgoing, and ready for adventure, the group bonded over shared experiences on the ship. July 4, 2005, started as a day of pure enjoyment and ended with a night of celebration. After exploring the sunlit streets of Mykonos and indulging in its local cuisine, George and Jennifer joined their friends for a lively evening on board. The destination. The ship's casino, a hub of excitement where fortunes could change with the roll of the dice. It was the perfect cap to an already unforgettable day. Inside the casino, George and Josh gravitated to the craps table, laughing and betting as the dice rolled. Jennifer, on the other hand, spent her time at the poker table, where her easygoing charm made her a standout. Witnesses later recalled the couple's playful banter and the laughter they shared, despite losing a significant amount of money by the night's end. But as the drinks flowed and the hours ticked by, the atmosphere began to shift. The casino closed at 2:30 a.m., and surveillance footage captured the last confirmed sighting of George Smith. He is seen leaving the casino, appearing visibly intoxicated but still walking on his own. What should have been an unremarkable end to a celebratory evening instead marked the beginning of a mystery that would haunt his loved ones forever. According to some witnesses, George returned to his cabin with a group of friends, while others claimed he lingered behind. Discrepancies in these accounts would later frustrate investigators, casting doubt on the events that unfolded in those critical early hours of July 5. As the night progressed, Jennifer, now heavily intoxicated, was seen stumbling through the ship's corridors, far from the couple's stateroom. Witnesses would later describe her as disoriented and vulnerable, needing assistance from the ship's staff to return to her cabin. Meanwhile, George, separated from his wife, was left in the company of their new acquaintances. What happened next would forever alter the course of their story. In the early hours of July 5, 2005, the Royal Caribbean cruise liner glided through the still waters of the Aegean Sea. Passengers were sound asleep in their cabins, lulled by the rhythm of the waves. But while the ship moved serenely, something unspeakable was unraveling on board. Around 8 a.m., 16-year-old Emily Rausch of Chicago looked out of her cabin window. The sight that greeted her wasn't the tranquil morning she expected. On the white canopy of a lifeboat just below Deck 7, streaks of blood stood out starkly against the ship's pristine surface. A dark smear trailed ominously toward the canopy's edge, hinting at a violent, tragic fall into the abyss below. Emily's chilling discovery set off a chain of events that would grip the passengers and crew in a wave of fear and speculation. Someone was missing from the ship. That someone was George Smith, a 26-year-old honeymooner who, just days earlier, had been laughing, drinking, and celebrating his new life with his wife, Jennifer Hagel. Now George was nowhere to be found, and the evidence left behind painted a disturbing picture. Investigators quickly turned their attention to cabin 9062, the stateroom George had shared with Jennifer. Inside, the scene was anything but ordinary. The bed was unkempt, and bloodstains were visible on the sheets and towels. Small drops of blood dotted the carpet, leading toward the balcony. There, on the balcony railing, smudged fingerprints were discovered, silent witnesses to a struggle. A chair had been dragged suspiciously close to the edge, as if someone had sat or been forced to sit there. It was an unsettling tableau, one that hinted at violence, desperation, and perhaps something far darker. But the mystery deepened with Jennifer Hagel's discovery. As the crew searched for answers, Jennifer was found not in the cabin but in the ship's spa, receiving a pre-scheduled massage. Disoriented and visibly intoxicated, Jennifer claimed she had no idea where her husband was. She explained that she had last seen him the night before, assuming he was with friends or had returned to their room while she wandered the ship. Yet witnesses provided a different, more troubling account. Jennifer had been seen staggering through the ship's hallways in the early hours of the morning, visibly intoxicated and needing assistance to stay upright. At one point, she had collapsed in a corridor, where ship staff found her sleeping. By the time she was wheeled back to her stateroom, George was already missing, and the balcony curtains were drawn tightly closed. Jennifer, however, showed no signs of alarm, an observation that would raise more questions than it answered. The peaceful veneer of the Royal Caribbean cruise was shattered. Passengers were disturbed, rumors spread like wildfire, and the crew scrambled for answers. Jennifer Hagel, the last known person to have seen George alive, could provide little clarity. As investigators began piecing together the fragments of that fateful night, one thing became clear. The honeymoon had turned into a nightmare, and the ship was now the scene of a harrowing mystery. What happened to George Smith in those early morning hours? Was it an accident, a robbery gone wrong, or something far more sinister? As the ship sailed on, so too began the investigation into a case that would haunt the seas and those left behind for years to come. When the Royal Caribbean liner docked in Turkey, the investigation into George Smith's disappearance officially began. Turkish authorities boarded the ship, met with a torrent of rumors, unease, and unanswered questions. What had initially seemed like a tragic accident was quickly taking on the form of something far more sinister. The evidence that awaited them in cabin 9062 and the accounts of that night painted a grim and deeply conflicting picture. But Jennifer wasn't the only one under scrutiny. Investigators also turned their attention to a group of young men who had spent much of the night with George. This group included Josh Askin, a 20-year-old Californian known for his wit and charm, and 3 Russian-American youths, Greg Rosenberg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. Their accounts of the night's events were inconsistent and, at times, downright suspicious. The young men claimed they had accompanied George back to his cabin around 3 a.m., placing him in bed before leaving. Yet discrepancies in their stories quickly emerged. Josh Askin, for instance, alleged that Jennifer had left the casino with another man, a claim contradicted by ship security footage, which showed her stumbling away alone. Then there was the matter of a chilling videotape that surfaced during the investigation. In it, the young men were seen laughing and joking about giving someone a lesson in paragliding without a parachute. While they insisted it was just a joke, the timing and context raised serious suspicions about their involvement in George's disappearance. The physical evidence pointed to more than just an accident. Bloodstains in the cabin and on the canopy suggested a violent struggle or trauma, but what had caused it? Witnesses recalled George and Jennifer discussing large sums of money earlier that night, wedding gifts or casino winnings, depending on the account. Could they have been targeted for robbery? George wore an expensive Breitling watch, and Jennifer's engagement ring was a valuable piece. Had someone entered the cabin looking for cash or valuables, or was this a case of alcohol-fueled recklessness spiraling out of control? And then there was the matter of the chair by the balcony. Its position suggested that George, or someone else, had been sitting there. Was it voluntary? Was he coerced? Theories swirled. Had George fallen accidentally, climbed over the railing in a drunken daze, or been pushed during a struggle? The answers were as elusive as George himself. Jennifer's claims of memory loss, the young men's conflicting testimonies, and the unsettling physical evidence left behind turned the investigation into a tangled web of contradictions. Turkish authorities tried to piece together the night's events, but for every question answered, two more emerged. What was clear was this: George Smith had suffered before his disappearance, and someone on board the Royal Caribbean ship knew more than they were saying. The case was only just beginning, but the path to the truth was shrouded in doubt, deception, and a growing sense that justice would be anything but straightforward. The disappearance of George Smith wasn't just a mystery, it was a devastating loss for the Smith family. And while the cruise liner sailed on, their lives came to a halt. For George's parents and his sister Bree, grief quickly turned into a fight for answers, for justice, and for the truth about what really happened that night on the Royal Caribbean. The Smith family's first demand was for transparency. They pushed Royal Caribbean to cooperate fully with investigators and share any evidence that might shed light on George's fate. Frustrated by the lack of progress, they took matters into their own hands. To draw attention to the case and encourage witnesses to come forward, they offered a $100,000 reward for any information leading to answers. The Smiths also called for a boycott of Royal Caribbean, accusing the cruise line of prioritizing their reputation and profits over uncovering the truth. But the Smiths weren't just relying on public pressure. They enlisted the help of independent forensic expert Dr. Henry Lee, whose meticulous work had previously been key in high-profile cases. Dr. Lee's analysis raised serious doubts about the theory that George's death was an accidental fall. He pointed out the suspicious placement of the chair near the balcony, the blood evidence in the cabin, and the improbability of George falling over the high railing without some form of external force. However, the Smith family's efforts were repeatedly stymied. Access to key evidence was limited, and Royal Caribbean refused to allow certain forensic tests on board, citing logistical concerns. The ship's owner appeared reluctant to engage fully with the investigation, leading the Smiths to believe that vital information was being withheld. Their fight for the truth seemed to hit a wall. Meanwhile, the FBI had taken over the case. Federal agents conducted polygraph tests and interrogations with key individuals who had been with George that night. Among them was Josh Askin, the charismatic Californian, and the Russian-American youths Greg, Zach, and Rostislav. The results of these interrogations only deepened suspicions. While Josh and the Russian-Americans claimed they had nothing to hide, their behavior told a different story. Josh Askin, in particular, failed a polygraph test, raising serious questions about his honesty. The Russian-Americans invoked their Fifth Amendment rights during questioning, refusing to provide direct answers that might incriminate them. Their alibis were also inconsistent, with discrepancies in their accounts of what happened after leaving George in his cabin. Investigators noted that their testimonies often contradicted each other and lacked credibility. This evasiveness led the FBI to suspect that the group was hiding critical information about the events leading to George's disappearance. The Smith family's relentless pursuit of justice and the FBI's ongoing investigation painted a complex picture. Was George the victim of a robbery gone wrong? Had his new acquaintances played a direct role in his death? Or were there other forces at play, concealed by the haze of conflicting stories and obstructed investigations? Each step forward seemed to reveal new layers of doubt and deceit. For George's family, the fight was not just for George, it was for the truth and for accountability. But as the investigation dragged on, it became clear that justice, if it ever came, would be slow, difficult, and perhaps incomplete. The disappearance of George Smith remains one of the most chilling mysteries of the open seas. Years of investigation, countless hours of forensic analysis, and the tireless efforts of his family all led to a conclusion that felt less like justice and more like surrender to the unknown. For George's loved ones, the case remains an open wound, one that has never fully healed. In 2012, after nearly 8 years of investigations, the FBI officially closed George Smith's case. The agency ruled his disappearance an accident, citing insufficient evidence to support charges of foul play. To many, this ruling came as a shock. These unanswered questions lingered like shadows, casting doubt on the conclusion and leaving George's family with a profound sense of injustice. The Smith family was devastated. For them, the evidence didn't suggest an accident, it pointed to something darker. They believed George had been the victim of foul play and felt the investigation had failed to uncover the full truth. Their anger turned toward Royal Caribbean, the cruise line where the tragedy occurred. From the very beginning, the Smiths had accused Royal Caribbean of prioritizing its reputation over the pursuit of justice. They criticized the cruise line for a lack of transparency and for hindering the investigation. Forensic expert Dr. Henry Lee, hired by the Smith family, raised serious doubts about the official narrative. Yet many of his requests for additional evidence and testing were denied. Adding to the family's heartbreak was the role of Jennifer Hagel, George's wife. For a time, Jennifer had stood with the Smiths, sharing in their grief and their search for answers. But in 2006, she reached a settlement with Royal Caribbean, accepting $1 million in exchange for dropping further legal action against the cruise line. Jennifer insisted the settlement was a necessary step forward, allowing her to move on after years of public scrutiny and emotional trauma. She claimed to have acted under the advice of legal counsel and FBI investigators. But for George's family, the settlement felt like a betrayal. To them, it symbolized closure at the cost of truth. They believed the settlement not only undermined their efforts to hold Royal Caribbean accountable, but also distanced Jennifer from their shared goal of finding justice for George. The decision drove a wedge between Jennifer and the Smith family, a rift that never fully healed. After the settlement, Jennifer began rebuilding her life. She remarried, started a family, and dedicated herself to charitable causes in George's memory. But the Smith family's fight continued. They offered rewards, gave interviews, and worked tirelessly to keep George's case in the public eye. Yet despite their relentless efforts, no new evidence emerged, and no one was held accountable for George's death. The FBI's conclusion, a tragic accident, remains the official ruling. But the Smith family, and many others who have followed the case, remain unconvinced. The evidence, the conflicting accounts, and the eerie behavior of some witnesses still raise troubling questions. In the end, justice for George Smith has been elusive. His disappearance on that fateful July night remains a chilling reminder of the unanswered questions that can linger forever, and the pain left behind when the truth remains just out of reach. This case isn't just about George Smith. It's about accountability and the systemic issues surrounding crimes that occur at sea. Cruise companies, bound by complex international regulations, often face criticism for prioritizing corporate interests over transparency. Forensic investigations are hindered by limited resources, jurisdictional disputes, and a lack of standardized protocols. George's case underscores the urgent need for reform and accountability to ensure that no family endures the same heartbreak without answers. And so, the mystery of George Smith endures, a chilling reminder of how fragile life can be, even in moments meant for joy and celebration. His story is one of love, loss, and unanswered questions, leaving us all to wonder what really happened on that fateful night in July 2005. Thank you for joining me today on this deep dive into the case of George Smith, a tragedy that continues to haunt the seas and the hearts of those who loved him. If this story moved you, puzzled you, or made you question the mysteries that lurk in our world, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.